What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to learn all about stretching and mobility. Alrighty everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a viewer request. Yes, that's right. Someone sent in a topic that would like for me to discuss. So we're going to discuss that. Alright, and the topic is going to be just a general topic about stretching, mobility, and how to fit it into your life schedule, not only for warming up before your sessions, but also possibly in your off days between your sessions. So the first thing we're going to go over is some of the limitations with this topic for this video, and in general with any topic when you're doing in video form. There are some limitations, one of them obviously being time. We're not going to spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour breaking every single little thing down when it comes to this specific topic of stretching mobility. And the other thing is the context. So even though this channel is for powerlifters, there is still some context within that, depending on your specific needs of your age, your previous injuries, your mobility levels, if you're doing full power, if you're doing bench only, all these different things that may change what applies to you specifically. So we'll go over some of the general ideas and general concepts of ways you can do things, and then you have to figure out whether that fits you or if you need to make adjustments for your specific situation. The first thing we want to go over is what research is out there on this topic, and there's plenty of research out there over plenty of years on this topic, but there's nothing definitive. There's no one set answer of, okay, this is what the research shows and this is what you should do, or else everyone would be doing it. There's lots of different research out there. Some show negative things for certain ways of stretching or foam rolling or wherever like that, and some show some positive things. And when you dig deeper into it, you can see that context that we're talking about is that it depends on what group you're doing it on, it depends on how the study is set up, and other factors like that. For example, there are some studies out there that show negative performances when you do static stretching. The idea being that if you stretch a rubber band and hold it for a long period of time, like you would like for a muscle, is that it's going to lose that elasticity, and so you're going to have less of that stretch reflex and you're going to have a lower performance, especially when it comes to power output. But when you dig deeper into the study, you will see that there's some things like the stretching was done for a very long time, more than most people do in real life, where they might be stretching a muscle for 2 to 10 minutes. So yeah, if you hold a stretch for 10 minutes straight, and like I said, really stretch out that muscle and increase the range of motion or your flexibility, then you may get that positive effect of the increase of flexibility, but then you may get that negative effect of the power output. But how many people in real life are actually holding a stretch for 10 minutes before they go squat or bench press? The other thing I've noticed in some of these studies is how long before your training or you're maxing out whatever you're doing for the test affects whether you get that negative effect or not. So if you go and stretch for 10 minutes on a muscle and then you go try and max out a squat, then yes, there are some negative performances, but they show that if you wait 10 or 15 minutes after the stretch, then a lot of the negative performances go away. Okay, so when it comes to these research studies out there on whether it's static stretching or dynamic stretching or foam rolling or any other kinds of stretching or mobility recovery tools, you have to see the limitations of the study and the context of the study, what group it was done and how was it done, to again see whether you fall into that population and whether you're doing the same protocols or similar protocols, or are they doing something very extreme that's different than what you would do in real life. All right, so let's start going into what can we actually do in real life for powerlifters for stretching and mobility. And you can break it up into two groups. One could be what you're gonna do as part of your warm-up before you actually do your training session, and then one group will be what you may do in the off days or your non-training days to prepare you for your next training session. So some of the concepts that we go over when you are warming up is you're basically warming up to prepare for that exercise or exercises that you are doing. So you want to somewhat make the exercises related to what you're doing. Your warm-up exercises related to what your training exercises are, whether it is the same exact movement or a variation, or working those same muscle groups and same joints through a similar or extended range of motion. So kind of an example to bring this concept into something for powerlifters is that if you're gonna go bench press, then you probably don't wanna go warm up on the treadmill. The treadmill may increase your core temperature and get blood flowing, which can be good working out and can have maybe a very small benefit for bench press, but you're missing out on all the other stuff as far as warming up those specific muscles, the pecs, the delts, the triceps, and warming up those specific joints, like if you have to move your shoulder joint through an extended range of motion because you have difficulty maybe touching the bar to your chest when you are cold. So you're missing out on those things. The other thing you're missing out on when you're not using something that's more specific is maybe ingraining that motor pattern before you start your training. So if you have issues with bench pressing or squatting with your bar path, or maybe just your balance or anything like that, your bracing, then you want to do exercises as part of your warm-up to kind of hone that skill before you start loading up weight and doing your working sets. So again, doing the treadmill won't help you for the bench press. Okay, so when you are selecting a warm-up exercise, you can look at the exercise and say, okay, is this increasing my core temperature? Is this warming up the muscles that I'm trying to train? Is this warming up the range of motion of the joint that I'm trying to use? Is this preparing my technique and my skill for the exercise that I'm doing? And also you may want to look at the other muscles or the other joints that are being maybe used as far as positioning, but not used in the actual movement. So for example, in the low bar back squat, a lot of people have issues with the bar position and being able to get that low bar position without causing pain in their wrists, their elbows, or their shoulders. So while the main movers might be the quads, hamstrings, glutes, the main joints may be the ankles, knees, and hips, you don't want to completely neglect the shoulders and just overall upper body mobility if you have limited range of motion and you have issues with that bar position or elbow pain during the squat. So there's going to be some of those little extra things that you're going to want to put in there for those other joints that are being used in the movement that you have trouble with. Now you don't have to go through and do an entire upper body stretch and warm up and spend 30 minutes warming up your upper body to do low bar squats, because most likely you are on limited time and you're just not going to be able to stay consistent with it. So you want to focus on just a couple exercises, maybe even just one exercise to get the most bang for your buck to kind of warm up that area, build up the range of motion in that joint, so then you can go and put more of your time into warming up your lower body since you are doing squats and you want to be prepared for that specific movement. All right, and then the separate areas what you might want to do on the off days. And so you have to see, well, what is the goal for the off day that you are trying to stretch, foam roll, or do whatever you want to do or whatever you've been thinking about that you want to do in those off days. One of the goals may be that you have limited range of motion, maybe you're not very flexible and you want to increase your flexibility on the off days to better prepare you on the training days. So then you have to look at, again, the context of your sport. So for a sport like, let's say, gymnastics, you need a lot of flexibility. If we go something closer to powerlifting for Olympic weightlifting, you still need a decent amount of flexibility, especially like in the ankles to be able to catch in the bottom position, and then in the shoulders for the snatch. Okay, but in powerlifting, we don't need as much flexibility as those sports. You need some flexibility just to be able to hit depth in the squat. You need some flexibility to be able to touch the bar to your chest for the bench press, and then some flexibility in the deadlift to be able to maintain a straight back or as close as possible while the weights are on the floor. So a lot of people already have enough range of motion and enough flexibility for these competition lifts, and a lot of people actually have more range of motion, so they could actually go deeper in their squat than just below parallel if they needed to, while being able to still maintain that neutral spine and everything else feet flat on the floor. So they don't need to be doing extended stretching or foam rolling or anything like that in the off days to increase their flexibility, because they already have enough for their sport. All they need to do is the warm up before they do their training session, just to get as much of that range of motion and kind of, like I said, warm up the body and bring up the core temperature before they do their exercise. Another reason or another goal that you may want to be doing it for the off days is that you're trying to increase your recovery. So you're thinking that, okay, if I stretch or if I foam roll these muscles that are sore or painful, that'll increase the recovery. And again, lots of research on there, and there's no definitive answer. Some of it is more theories or anecdotal evidence that, oh, if I foam roll my quad, then it kind of takes the pain away and then also helps the recovery. Maybe, maybe not, but you can focus on the bigger things first. And I talk about this in my video going over the hierarchy of progress. I'll put the little card for it above so you can go check it out. But you have to look at what are the most important factors. So one of the factors can be programming. Are you doing too much and you're not able to recover enough for the next session? And maybe you need to adjust that. Are you sleeping enough? There's a lot of research out there that shows if you're sleeping more in the, let's say, 7 to 9 hours, you're gonna be able to recover a lot better and reduce your risk of injury compared to if you're only sleeping like 3 to 5 hours. So you can look into that. Hydration is also important. There's a lot of research that shows that if you are dehydrated, it can really hinder your strength and your ability to output strength, power, all these different things on that day. So it's important that you have enough hydration before your sessions, and really just every day just helps with recovery and a lot of other things. So these are some of the bigger factors you may want to look into, so that if you are training 4 times a week, let's say, and in your off days, you're trying to stretch or foam roll, whatever, all 3 times, and it just becomes too much. You're always focusing on your training, your recovery, your nutrition, all the stuff like that, and it just becomes too much when you have a work life and you have maybe a family life, or you just have other things, other hobbies that you like to do outside the sport. So you can maybe just focus on those more important things like proper programming, proper sleep, proper hydration, and then not worry about doing this off days 3 times a week of stretching or whatever else you want to do. All right, and just a little thing to throw in there for both your warming up before your training session and anything that you do in your off days. There is something to be said about if you think that it helps you and maybe you see some kind of anecdotal evidence of it being a positive effect and you have the time for it, then keep doing it. Like I said, there's a lot of research out there that shows positive and negative effects for these different things in different scenarios. And so if it's not having a negative effect for you and it maybe has a positive effect of just placebo, or you just thinking that because you're doing it that that's what's causing it, and maybe it's something else that's causing it, go ahead and do it and don't worry about it so much. And the other thing is part of powerlifting and stretching, whatever journey you're on, whatever hobby you're doing, is the fun aspect for it. So if it's fun for you to kind of like learn different mobility drills to do, and you like to do that at home, maybe you like to do it with someone like a roommate or anything like that. If you like doing yoga, whatever, on off days, again, if you have the time for it, you're enjoying it, there's no negative effects from it, then continue doing it. All right, so now let's kind of go over an example. Like I said, there are some limitations to this, so we'll try and go an example that may cover some people, but it's not going to cover 100% of people, may not even cover 75% of people. Maybe this example of how to warm up for a training session would only cover, let's say, 30 to 50% of powerlifters. But if you fall into that category, then maybe it's a type of warming up that you would like to do. If you don't fall into the category, then again, you have to look and see what kind of adjustments you have to make for you. So if we take a typical healthy powerlifter that has more range of motion and more mobility than the competition lifts require, then we won't worry about the off days for stretching, mobility, all that kind of stuff. We'll just focus on the training days. So like I said, you want to focus on warming up those areas that the lift is dependent on, or the lift uses. So for example, we have a squat day, so we want to focus more of our warming up on our lower body, and we want to go through somewhat of a range of motion, like I said, similar to the squat. So what you could start off with is some kind of dynamic stretching that is going to, like I said, increase the core temperature and start loosening up some of those muscles. So you could do stuff like leg swings front to back, you could do leg swings side to side, you could do hip circles, sometimes they're called fire hydrants, so you can look up those exercises on YouTube and look for that kind of stuff. So that way, that's going to help loosen up and warm up the hip flexors, the hamstrings, the glutes, the adductors, the abductors, those muscles that are going to be used in the squat. You may also, like I said, want to warm up a little bit upper body for that low bar position. So maybe you grab a dowel or a PVC pipe and you do shoulder dislocations and figure eights and some circles to move the shoulder joint through a full range of motion and get a little bit of stretch in there to open them up so that you can get into that low bar position properly without too much pain. And then, like I said, you may want to hone in that pattern. So maybe you grab a kettlebell or a dumbbell and you do goblet squats, focusing on your proper foot position. So you can even do this barefoot, get your stance that you usually use for your squat, making sure you're spreading out those toes, you're pushing down through the big toe, the little toe through the heel, you're holding that weight in front of you, you are bracing properly, keeping your rib cage down, and then going through the entire range of motion. And you can take your time, you can go down slowly and come up slowly, focusing on proper positioning. okay? So then again, you're warming up those muscles through that same range of motion, but you're also practicing that movement pattern before you get under the barbell and do some heavier squats. And then the other thing that's worth noting as part of your warm-up is you're also warming up with that movement with lighter weights working up to your working set. So if your working set is 100 pounds for 5 reps, you're not gonna just load up 100 pounds and go do 5 reps even after you've done all these other things. You wanna start with the empty bar and do more reps. So maybe you do 8 reps or 10 reps. Then you put on a little bit of weight, let's say 75 pounds, and then you do that for maybe 4 to 6 reps. So now with this 45 pounds and the 75 pounds, again, you're working through those muscles through that similar range of motion, increasing core temperature, loosening up those muscles, honing in that movement pattern, making sure everything feels good, nothing is off, checking to make sure your belt fits and all that kind of stuff. And then you would load up your working set of 100 pounds and go do your 5 reps. So now before you got to that weight, you've already done all these other things. You've done the dynamic warm up, you've warmed up the movement pattern with the goblet squats, and then you've also warmed up the movement pattern with the actual barbell low bar back squat. So hopefully that example for warming up for a low bar back squat helps you out. Like I said, if you don't fall into that category and maybe you have other serious issues, then you're gonna want to maybe adapt that warm up. So maybe you have to do some kind of static stretching to loosen up a certain joint or muscle in order to be able to hit depth in the low bar back squat. And maybe that will also mean you have to do maybe 1 time out of your 3 non-training days, some kind of stretching and everything like that to continuously improve it until you get to a point where then you fall into that category that I went over, where you naturally have more mobility, more flexibility than the exercises that you're doing, in this case, the squat. All right, so if you have any questions about stretching or mobility, you want me to send you links to any research studies that are out there, then comment those below and I'll help you out. And if you have any questions or topics you would like me to discuss in the future, like this one that I answered for a viewer, then again, comment those below and I will add it to my list and then eventually make a video about it. But hopefully you're having a good day and I'll see you next time.